Hello there, welcome to Fridays at Noon. I'm Michael Chen, the executive producer and director for this talk show series. Fridays at Noon is a bi-weekly lunch and learn series that offers education on professional development topics to the University of Denver employees. For more information and to view past videos, please visit du.edu/HR and click on the People Development link. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the rest of the show.
And bring your lunch.
Oh, and bring your lunch.
Organizations today are moving toward a performance management system that helps them facilitate performance expectations, provides a forum for two-way communication between the manager and the employee around performance, and better ties in performance with the performance appraisal itself. Here at DU, we've recently enhanced the performance management system, and I've asked DU's training consultant, Shannon Seals, to spend some time with us to break down what it is, how it works, and what are the benefits to the system. So welcome, Shannon.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so let's just start with big picture and kind of work our way down. All right, so from your perspective, what is a performance management system if you had to explain it to somebody?
Okay, well, what you said in the introduction was right on. It is meant to really tie performance into a process and into a system. So a performance management system is simply a software tool that employees and managers can use throughout the year in order to keep track of development goals, the progress on those goals, and performance throughout the year, and then also to complete appraisals at the end of the year.
So what would you say are probably the top benefits to such a system?
Well, research shows that employees feel more valued when they're given regular feedback. So the main benefit of this system is that it's an easy way for managers to keep track of constructive and positive feedback they give their employees throughout the year, and also for employees to make note of when they're given that kind of feedback and what they do as a result.
Yeah.
So at the end of the year, it's all in one place.
Yeah, that's the key. I mean, it gives them one place where they can both go and kind of update each other on what's happening.
Right.
Yeah, okay. All right, who benefits more from this system, would you say, the manager or the employee?
You know, I really think it's whoever buys into the whole process more.
Yeah.
So the employee has some unique benefits up front because they're allowed to have a say in their own development goals by using the performance management system. On the other side, the manager also has an opportunity early on in the year, every year, to set some performance expectations via those goals. So really, whoever uses the system consistently will benefit most.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, all right, so we kind of know what the benefits are. Just candidly, do you think most people look at this as a get to, like they get to use the system, or as a have to?
Unfortunately, I think, if I'm going to be honest, right now it's a have to. But I think it's a have to for a couple of reasons here at DU. I see people in the room smiling a little bit about that. It's a have to because, for one thing, we're in an implementation year.
Yeah, right.
Implementations of software are painful. So people are so focused on the logistics and the required steps that they can't yet see the big picture. So that's making it feel like a have to.
Yeah.
And then also, as a history here at DU, we've always seen performance appraisal tied to merit, as opposed to tying our performance appraisal process to improving performance. So once we slowly start to make that shift, I think it'll become more of a beneficial tool than a have to.
Yeah, and I would imagine, too, that whenever you get near a deadline where things have to be completed, now we're moving toward the performance appraisal component, all of a sudden people that haven't been monitoring it or working it now have to get it done, and it definitely would feel like a have to.
It does,
under those. You know, when you wait till the end, it's going to be one of those experiences, I suppose, for some people. So what are the required steps that people have to take on this?
Okay. Initially, at the start of a performance cycle, everyone needs to get a goal in the system. It can be as simple as one development goal that employees sets themselves. We would prefer to see a few more than that. but there has to be some goal, because in the end that counts for 20% of the final appraisal. The only other required steps happen at the end of the cycle when we're completing the self and manager appraisals. And those steps have to happen because that does give a final rating to the employee. All the in-between stuff is really the most beneficial parts, and I hope people see the value in that over time, but they're not required by the system in order to progress.
Okay. And we'll get into the goals in a minute, to kind of walk through that. But what are the additional features of that system that people could be doing?
Okay. One of my favorite parts of the system is that every employee is given a journal within the system, and they can use that journal to keep private notes about their own performance, their interactions, the feedback they receive, the communication with their manager and their constituents throughout the year, so that at the end of the year, it's all in one place. The manager, as well as having their own journal to keep their own notes, the manager is given a journal to keep about each of their employees. So before they meet with that employee, they simply open the journal, print the page, and they have their whole year of notes in one place. That's definitely one of my favorite features. Another feature that will become much more beneficial once we have a couple cycles under our belt is that a goal can be taken from a previous performance cycle and continued into a next cycle by simply using a copy button. So if you set a goal with a 3-year timeline, you can show your progress at the end of this cycle, copy that goal to the next year, and continue progressing, which I think is a really great feature and something that we didn't have in our old system.
Well, speaking about the old system, so how is this one better?
In the old system, there was a lot of back and forth. Part of that driven by the system, and part of that driven by our employees being used to having those options. This system is much more of a social media feel. So when the employee opens their appraisal form, it's all live in one form. They can save it as a draft as often as they need to until they've worked out all the tweaks and have all the wording like they like before they submit it to their manager, and the manager's able to see it. The same thing's true from the manager perspective. The manager can work in the document, think about it over time, go in and out, and use it as more of a social media type of place until they're ready to have that face-to-face meeting with the employee. So I think that's a huge benefit that we didn't have in SuccessFactors.
Now, you've been involved with this system, pretty intricately. Is it a user-friendly system from your perspective?
I think it is. And I'm getting feedback from the majority of the users that they really appreciate it much more than our old system. So I think it is user friendly. I think we're not seeing the true benefit yet because people aren't used to using it. Once we have a complete cycle under our belts, I look forward to gathering some feedback about how people think it is to use.
Okay. Let's talk a little more about the goal setting part, because that's really the integral first part of this whole thing. So who sets the goals, the manager or the employee?
We've recommended that both, that the employee take that opportunity to set a couple goals for themselves for the year, and also that the manager creates a couple goals as well. And the manager can create goals for individual direct reports or create goals and have the whole department work on the same ones. So ideally both.
Yeah. And is that, what's it called? Is it cascading?
Cascading,
That's when they pass it down to everybody or to a group, right?
Right. Cascading is the action of sending a goal downward.
So how engaged, if you were going to give advice, how engaged should an employee be with the goal setting? Is there an advantage to that?
Yeah, there's a big advantage, and the outcomes are directly reflective to how engaged the employee is during goal setting. If the employee takes that opportunity to really look at how they want to develop that year, set a goal around it, any duties that they think could be done better or differently, and they want to set a goal around it, that's their opportunity to have that goal not only put in a document and approved by their manager, but also they get appraisal on that goal at the end of the year. So it's their chance to affect what their end of the year appraisal looks like.
So it'd be worth it for them to take the time and really think about that. because a lot of managers, they know what's on their job description, but in terms of specific goals, if it's not a give and take, really the employee could be at risk because they're going to be rated on things that maybe they didn't create in some cases, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the same's true for the manager. And that, I would bet that was your next question, Greg.
Well, no, actually it wasn't. That's number here. SMART goals.
Yes.
Everybody hears that term. And see SMART goals. S means, what exactly is a SMART goal?
Okay. When you start to break down the acronym, it seems really complicated for the goal to have to meet these 5 requirements. It's really simple. You want a goal that you realistically can attain in the timeline you're given. You want a goal that is measurable. So is there some way to know
if you did it or
that
not.
you did it or not, right? And then you want something that's realistic. Is it realistic for you to accomplish this, or are you thinking lofty and you're going to set yourself up for failure? You don't want to do that. So it's really just as simple as that.
Yeah, something that you could go back to later and it would be fairly clear, yes, I did it or I didn't do it.
Exactly.
There wouldn't be a lot of gray area.
Exactly.
So, do you have an example of a SMART goal?
Sure. I think the easiest way to reference what a SMART goal would look like is to look at customer service. So as a frontline employee, you may know customer service needs to be improved. But what realistically can you do in the span of a performance cycle or a few that will make a change? What would that change look like? And how would you measure it? So do you want to improve customer service by serving more employees faster? Or do you want to improve customer service by responding to requests for service in a shorter timeline? So a great customer service goal would be to return phone calls received within 24 hours and any phone calls that cannot be answered to refer them to the person who can answer them within 48 would be a great goal.
Yeah. Okay. So something that's so clear that it can kind of be a measurement on an ongoing basis, because it's not just about the end of the year. That's a day-to-day, moment-to-moment goal.
And you can see
in
progress.
That case, yeah, you can see progress. Yeah. How many goals should people have on there? Is there a maximum, minimum?
We'd like to see the minimum about 4 and the maximum no more than 8. But here's the thing. We recognize that some units use goals on more of a as a project comes up basis, and they may have a few more than 8 throughout the year. Some units, the job description is so big to begin with that 1 or 2 goals is going to be all they can realistically manage in addition to that within a year. That's perfectly acceptable as well.
So, okay, so if you have a job description, with 12 things, and then you're like, well, they're all part of how I'm going to be evaluated. So how would somebody out of that pick a goal or 2? Like, would you just pick the ones that maybe, demand higher level effort and results for the coming year? Like, how do you do that?
It's a good question, and it comes up a lot with people not understanding. People think that those 12 things listed in their job description need to be reflected in their goals.
Yeah.
They don't actually have to be. Your goals may be the improvement of one of those 12 things if there is an opportunity for that. But your goals may be to learn something new or take on something totally outside of your job description as well. There's going to be an opportunity later for people to list those 12 things and get appraised on them, but your goals don't have to directly affect those 12 things.
Okay. All right. So the employee submits 3 goals. The supervisor adds a couple. And then does the supervisor sign off at that point? And then what happens? Do they just sit there in the system? Like, is that what happens?
Yes. So ideally, the manager would cascade a couple goals to the employee. The employee would set a couple of their own. And then this is a very important step that occasionally gets missed. The manager needs to approve the whole goal plan. So we don't worry about individual goals, but just one time that manager needs to go in and approve the whole plan. And then those goals just sit there so that they can reference them throughout their progress meetings and things like that.
So do managers, do they ever they see the first goal and they approve them individually? Does that create a problem in the system?
So managers cannot see their employees' goals until the employee has asked the manager to approve them.
All right.
So that helps that process a little
All
bit.
right. Now, what about, so mid-year, you know how things change and all of a sudden there's probably a better goal or a tweaking of this goal. Who has to, is it a nightmare to go back in and change those? How would they do that, and who has to initiate it?
Initially, it was, and we heard a lot of feedback that employees and managers need to be able to adjust to changing needs in their work environment. So what we did is we went back to Silk Road and we asked them to reconfigure that part of the process. So now at any point during the year, either the employee or the manager can reopen the goal plan and make changes. If something additional came up, they could add a new goal that was going to be accomplished on a shorter timeline. That can be done all year long.
And then if that happens, the manager's got to reapprove it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I recommend that if you reopen the goal plan, wait till the end of the year before appraisals come out. Have the manager take one last look at the final goal plan and check that approve button at that point so that you don't have to keep reopening it back and forth throughout the year.
Okay. All right. So in terms of, this is more of coaching on your part. So for a manager, after the goals are identified and let's say locked in, between that point in time and then the performance appraisal, what should they be doing with this system?
When I talk to managers who are very engaged in the system and wanting to use it to the best they can, I recommend that they regularly and consistently communicate with their employees face-to-face or Skype or on the phone, some way where it's a two-way conversation about the progress on the goals, about any change in expectations. That's where problems come in, is when expectations are not regularly communicated. And then I also recommend the manager go into the system and make notes after every one of those conversations, so that way they don't have to remember at the end of the year.
And you know, the other important thing there is if a manager's utilizing the system on an ongoing basis, it's going to be a much easier process when they get to the performance appraisal, right? Because they know the system, they've already know where their notes are. It's when it's almost like they're relearning it because they haven't looked at it for months that it probably creates a little chaos, I would imagine.
It's so true. There's a lot of anxiety around using the system. I promise everybody, after 2 cycles, the system is going to be old hat.
Yeah.
It's really simple to use. It's just that it's so spotty this year how often people are using it.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
Yeah, and some of the challenges this year are because it's a new system and people are kind of trying to figure out how to use it.
Yep.
All right, so what about for the employee? Like, what advice would you have for the employee between finishing the goals and then that period of time before appraisal?
It's the exact same advice. Make sure you're engaging your manager regularly. Make sure you're clear on any changes in expectations. We know they happen, but we need to make sure we communicate them. And then also keep good notes, because at the end of the year, when you go to do your self-appraisal, you can copy and paste in the 10 things you've already made notes about. It'll make that a lot easier.
Okay. So let's get down and dirty with a lot of the common questions that you get. And I'll just start off with a couple, and then you can kind of fill in from there.
Sounds good.
How do they start? Is there a link that's real in an obvious place?
When we begin the process, both goal setting and the appraisal part, an email is launched to every employee, and that email gives them a link to log in, tells them what their username is, tells them what the first step to accomplish is. In addition, when people want to log in and they can't find that email or they know they deleted it, there's a link to log into the performance management system on the performance management page, which is under the people development tab of the HR page. And then there's also a link in Pioneer Web, the same place they used to log into PEDS.
So plenty of places to get in there. So what would cause somebody to get locked out of the system? Like, what does that mean?
If you had asked me this the first month, I probably would have cried, because I think I answered this 100 times a day. When you use an incorrect password 3 times, the system locks the account. It thinks someone's trying to break in. The problem is, since performance is not linked to Pioneer Web's single sign-in, like most of our other DU systems are, people are constantly trying to use their Pioneer Web credentials and then getting their account locked. So by dropping an email to performancemanagement@du.edu, one of the administrators can unlock that account within a few minutes.
Okay. All right, so give us some of the most common questions and the answers that would go with those.
Okay. Now that we're past the login question, which was by far the most common question of the entire implementation, the most common question now that we're into appraisals is people whose goals are not in their appraisal form. And it causes some anxiety. It is a really simple fix. So there's two situations that cause that to happen. One, only approved goals will feed into the appraisal form. So unless the manager has clicked that approve button, the goals are not going to show up, which is a really simple fix. The second reason is that if the employee has started that self-appraisal and without the goals being approved, then there's a refresh goals button on the bottom of the self-appraisal form, and when they click that button, it will feed those goals in. By far the most common question I'm getting right now is, I'm doing my self-appraisal and there's no goals listed here. So that's how we can fix those. The second most common question, and it's more of an issue probably than a question, is people who call and they've mucked their way through the system, but they haven't looked at any of the training documentation or attended a training yet. It's never too late. We're offering ongoing trainings on how to use the system, and we'll show them beginning to end so they can register for the training courses on Pioneer Web. And then for those who are more of a visual learner and would rather look at a document, there are step-by-step screenshotted instructions on the performance management site as well. So that's causing a lot of hang-ups for people as how do I get trained? So there's many options on how to learn how to use the system.
Is that like when you purchase a bike and you have to build it and you don't look at the directions at all and you just try and same thing?
I think that's a gender thing.
Yeah. Sorry, I just...
There's actually one more really common question, and that's people who get into the system and either their supervisor's listed wrong or they can't see all of their direct reports. Performance gets its manager and direct report listings from Banner. So if there's anything that hasn't been updated in Banner due to a job change or a temporary leave, FMLA, there's a variety of reasons why supervisors would change. That's going to affect who has access to performance forms. So there is a form online, both on the Shared Services tab of the HR site and also on the performance page, where people can fill out a supervisory change request form. When that form is submitted, those changes are assured in both places. We'll make sure it's updated in Banner, and then we'll also make sure that that change has cascaded over to performance as well.
Now, who does that, the employee or the supervisor?
We'll take them from either. And often within units, there's a budget officer who likes to complete those forms and have them channeled through them. So they make sure that within their unit, the org chart is also correct.
Yeah, okay. Anything else that would be a common question, or is that most of them?
I think that's most of them.
Okay. Talk about we talked about job description earlier. How does that tie into this? Like, how should a manager be using the job description along with, this performance management system?
It's good to discuss, and it's really applicable for exactly where people are in the process right now. Everybody's wondering that. Yeah. So when you open the appraisal form, the very first field that people will complete is called job category. And it has a description that says something about, this is where you'll talk about your job duties and your job knowledge. That's where people will take a look at their job description and speak to how they did in their job that year based on what job description they were assigned. But that's also a place where people will look past their job description to those other duties as assigned, and they can speak to those in that area as well. So it's really helpful if both an employee and a manager have that job description handy when they're completing that first field of the self-appraisal.
Because it's not going to be listed anywhere.
it's not.
They've got to kind of have that available to be able to address that as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
We found in the old system that the job descriptions that we're feeding in were outdated and often not quite accurate of what employees were actually asked to do on a day-to-day basis. Employees should be assessed on what they're actually doing, not a list of 12 things where the priorities may have changed.
So it sounds like then for both the employee and the manager, as one of the steps in this process, or at least to have that available before they do the appraisal part.
Absolutely.
Because if they don't, then they'll be kind of guessing, what they thought that their main responsibilities were. Yeah.
Yes. If they can get on the same page during goal setting about what the job is going to look like for the year and use that when they get to appraisal, it makes the process much easier.
Down the road, will that ever be a part of it? Will that automatically feed in, or is that always going to be a separate thing?
We're considering that, and what would feed in would be the generic job descriptions that will be created as part of the university's comp study. So eventually, if you're an executive assistant, you would have a generic job description for an executive assistant that could feed in to the performance form so you could reference it. And then you could also speak to what additional things you do within your unit above and beyond that.
Okay. All right, so here's your chance to give final advice. So we've got managers out there. Mm-hmm. What one or two things you want to just, coach them on about this whole system if you had to narrow it down?
I would say keep good notes. Use the system to keep notes throughout the year. I'm hearing from managers that they're spending hours completing their direct reports appraisals because they're hunting for emails that were forwarded back and forth 3 months ago, and someone provided back feedback and they jotted it on a sticky note and it's somewhere in their office. So if you just simply add those things into the journal throughout the year, it'll be great. And imagine what it would feel like as an employee to have your manager have remembered all of the great things you did throughout the year and have them handy during the appraisal. That could really boost morale as well.
And if managers could just get in the habit of either whether it's monthly or weekly, just taking that 10 minutes and just committing to that, it would make their life a lot easier at the other end, and they wouldn't get as frustrated trying to find stuff, right?
Yes.
Okay, so now we've got the employees sitting here. What one or two pieces of advice would you give them?
I'd say the same thing. Keep good notes throughout the year. You deserve to be appraised on the great feedback that you received, the things you did above and beyond your job that you may not remember in October because you did them in February. So if you keep a good journal about yourself throughout the year, it's really going to help make that appraisal more applicable to what you actually did and more representative of the work you accomplished.
And it's really then a cut and paste part when you get to the self-appraisal then, as opposed to finding it, typing it in, and all these sheets of paper in front of you.
It is, and interestingly enough, in SuccessFactors, when you cut and pasted something in, it made a huge mess of your formatting, and this system is made for people to be able to cut from PDFs, Word documents, anything, and paste it in, and it will look appropriately laid out.
All right, so last question. Where do people go to either learn more? What's the best resource for them?
Okay, I would say probably the performance management webpage is going to provide the most up-to-date information and the most asked for information on the main page. So definitely the performance management website. It has timelines, it has steps in the process, so if someone gets confused, they can make sure they've hit all the steps. And then also on that page is a list of training documents, and we have documents for every step of the process. We have FAQs, we have descriptions and examples of SMART goals, a great wealth of information there. And then finally, if you have a specific question you can't find the answer to, people can always email performancemanagement@du.edu. If it's not a question you can articulate in an email, people are more than welcome to call me directly. Shannon Seals in the directory, and sometimes it's quicker for me to just look at their account, which I can do as an administrator, and answer a question that way.
All right. Anything else, or have we covered it pretty much?
I think we've covered it. The feedback so far has been really good from a user perspective, and I look forward to hearing what people think once we're through a cycle.
And some of these trainings involve people are on computers and
Yep.
they can actually walk through it with you, right, if they want to do that.
Exactly. If you're a hands-on learner, that's the best way to
Yeah.
come. I'll let you log into a computer. You can get your appraisal done right in the room so I can answer any questions. And our next training is September 10th, and you can register in Pioneer Web, and it's not full yet. So,
All right. Thank you, Shannon.
yeah, thanks for having me.
And thank you all for joining us. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Hit the button. Turn it off.
Bye.
You make me look really white. I look like a pale Irish girl on this video. Oh yeah, wait.
Is it rolling?
Yep.
Oh, okay.